What's going on, everybody? I hope all is well. Jeff Randall here, and one of the main issues I see with drummers that are struggling to make their grooves feel good is their lack of solid foot technique. This was actually a huge issue in my own playing for years because I started out using what's called the heel down technique. This is where you play the pedal essentially the same way that you tap your foot on the ground. And it's a very straightforward approach, but as I was progressing and playing on bigger and bigger stages, I was getting some feedback from my band members that they just couldn't feel my kick drum and therefore they couldn't lock into my grooves. I came to realize that the heel down approach was great for softer playing, but just didn't give me the volume and the power that I needed for these bigger stages because it uses such a small muscle group. So this sent me on a 2 to 3 year long journey to completely change my approach. I began studying some of my favorite groove drummers and noticed that most of them use the same two techniques, the heel up and the slide. And with these two techniques, they were able to play solid singles and doubles at various dynamic ranges and tempos. And I realized that that would take care of the vast majority of beats that I had to play. And today I want to unpack these techniques for you guys to hopefully save you from the years and years of frustration that I had to go through. All right, let's start with heel up. This is what you're going to use to play single strokes. And the basic approach can be broken down into 3 different motions. You have a press where you push down on the pedal with the ball of your foot using your calf muscle. This will in turn move your heel up and it will rest the beater against the head. Next, you have the thrust where you release the beater from the head, swing your hip forward, and use the weight and muscles of your leg to send the beater back into the bass drum. And finally, you have the drop where you bring your heel back down to rest. To practice this, start out by going from each movement really slowly and make sure that you keep the ball of your foot against the pedal board the entire time. That's your main point of contact. Once you feel comfortable with that, you can begin to speed things up and you'll notice that those 3 motions start to blend into one. One thing to keep in mind is that as the speed of these single strokes increases, you're gonna find it harder and harder to use your hip and entire leg to keep things going because it's such a big muscle mass. So when you play beats that require faster singles, you wanna move the action more to your calf, which will decrease your power but increase your speed. So that's the basic heel up technique that I was noticing most of my favorite drummers used. And you'll find that this is where most lessons on this topic tend to end, which was really frustrating for me back in the day because I was having some issues with this approach. And it all had to do with the fact that I was trying to cram everything I played into this one technique. So I just wasn't able to loosen up. And after more researching and more practicing, I was able to uncover the fact that there are actually many different variations of the heel up technique, and they all have their own pros and cons. Variation number 1 is the one we just unpacked. I'm doing what's called burying the beater, meaning that when you strike the bass drum head, you actually dig the beater into it, and then you release your heel down to rest. This produces a lot of attack and punch on the kick. Variation 2 is where you don't bury the beater. Instead, you bounce the beater off the head when you strike it. This produces a warmer and fuller tone because you're not holding the beater against the head, preventing it from resonating. For variation 3, we're gonna go back to burying the beater, except this time after your stroke, you're gonna keep a little bit of weight against the pedal, which will keep the beater against the head as you lower your heel. This is oftentimes the variation that I use because you can more quickly wind up for your next stroke because the beater is already against the head and you don't have to reset your position again. Another great thing about keeping the beater against the head is that it gets rid of all those little unintentional flutters between the beater and the bass drum head that happens as you roll your foot up the pedal board to prepare for your next stroke. Now, most of the time, you're not even gonna notice those little noises, but on occasion, you're gonna wanna play really cleanly, like in recording sessions, and it's really good to be able to do that. Now, you can also cancel out those little noises when you're not bearing the beater as well, which brings us to our 4th and last variation. Instead of rolling the ball of your foot up to bring the beater to the head to prepare for a stroke, you instead just lift your leg up, keeping the ball of your foot on the pedal board, and then you thrust forward and drop your heel like normal. This will give you that open and warm tone and mitigate those unintentional sounds as well. All right, those are the 4 heel up variations that I use most often. For me personally, I find that certain variations work best with certain beats and other variations work better with other beats. And over time, I've gotten to the point where I'm not even consciously deciding which variation I want to use. I'm just focused on staying loose and staying relaxed and seeing whatever sounds and feels right at the time. All right, moving on, let's talk about the slide technique. This is what you're going to use to play double strokes. You can think about the slide technique in terms of 2 motions. Start by bringing the ball of your foot back on the pedal board, giving you your first stroke. Then slide the ball of your foot forward using your calf muscle, giving you your second stroke. This is a great way to start practicing it. Just go back and forward, not trying to go too fast. At this slower pace, it's basically 2 different motions, but you'll see as you gradually speed it up, it'll morph into one smooth, fluid motion that gives you 2 individual strokes. Once you get it feeling good on its own, you can then apply it to your heel up technique with all the different variations that we talked about. So that's it. The next step is to start applying those techniques to some basic grooves, and that's what we're gonna do next time. If you wanna go ahead and get started, I'll link down below a transcription with a bunch of different bass drum patterns that you can start to work with. But that's gonna do it for today, everybody. I really hope that this helps you out. Be patient with this stuff. It's gonna take some time. Just enjoy the process. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. You take it easy. Bye-bye.